What's something that you've had a heavy hand in making better?
LCI has partnered with Bosch Refine My Site, and we're doing a lean roadshow. We did the first event in Chicago in May. I'm one of the key facilitators on day one. And so myself and the other primary facilitators sat down and did a huge PDCA on the whole session. And there are going to be a lot of constants this time around, but a lot of major changes that I was spending a bunch of time even yesterday still wrapping up.
Phenomenal. I saw the video that they posted on their YouTube channel too, and some of the content on social media. And I'll get there to one of those, but we'll put a link in the description below for that video so people can see.
Wow. Cool question. Actually, myself, I've had a very heavy hand in making myself better. I am, thanks to Renee, I am studying motivation. There's 40 years of research by a couple of guys in the University of Rochester named DC and Ryan, both professors, both researchers, deep research in all kinds of industries and literally around the world. And they have developed self-determination theory, and they have determined that motivation is dependent upon the addressing of three human needs: the need for relatedness, for competence, and for autonomy. And that will relate to today's discussion.
Oh my God, Dan, those are so tightly related to Scrum.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredible. So you said relatedness, autonomy, and mastery.
And yeah, mastery, competence is what the word they use, but mastery is good. Yeah.
Yeah. Relatedness. What is that? Like, can you explain that a little bit more?
With each other, it's the human connection, like the three of us. We have relatedness with each other, partially based on knowing each other a while, partially based on our mutual interest in the industry and in the topics that we develop in our minds and for others, and partly because we just like each other, and when we're pretty open and vulnerable with each other. I can think of many conversations that we've had one-on-one with each other that are, real.
Oh, I love the topic of learning. People, you're in store for a great episode.
Welcome to the EBFC Show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe, Engineer Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction. Today's episode is sponsored by
Bosch Refine My Site is a cloud-based construction collaboration platform that applies lean principles to enable your entire team to plan, communicate, and execute in real time. It's the digital tool that works in tandem with your last planner system process and puts it all together in one simple, collaborative ecosystem. This easy-to-use platform is available in English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and can be used on desktops, tablets, and mobile devices. According to Spencer Easton, scheduling manager at Oakland Construction,
Refine My Site, in my opinion, is the best, leanest tool on the market for last planner system.
Here's what our users have to say. We've looked at 3 other digital scheduling platforms and none compare to the straightforward approach Refine My Site takes. From milestone planning all the way down to daily tasks, this program gives every general contractor and their trade partners meaningful collaboration, accountability, and KPIs. Register today to try Refine My Site for free for 60 days.
Today's show is also sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute. LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Now, to the show.
Welcome to the EBFC Show. Welcome, Rebecca and Dan. Oh my goodness gracious. The two of you have been just so integral in the part of my journey as I've worked and worked better, making things easier and better across the industry. The two of you, just incredible stories. But for those that don't know you, please introduce yourselves to the EBFC Show audience and people. If you've got questions or comments for Dan and Rebecca, do not hesitate to comment on any social media or wherever you're watching this. We will be watching to be responding and engaging with all of you. Leave no question unasked.
Awesome. Thank you, Felipe. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Rebecca, and I'm the owner of RS Consulting. And I have been in this lean design and construction space since 2006, really is when I kind of got started. I had been working for a specialty contractor for about 10 years at that point in time, and we were undergoing a lean transformation, and I was part of our internal lean team. So I got to learn firsthand about applying lean to the organization. And then I stepped into the AEC world in 2008 when I was working on big projects. And that's actually where Dan Fauchier and I first crossed paths, and was on the California prison receivership team, like this huge, crazy co-opetition, I think we called it, right?
Right.
It was all these great design build teams working together, competing and cooperating, trying to design and build $7 billion worth of work in California. And so I spent 4 years as a consultant working for Lean Project Consulting, side by side with people like Greg Howell and Hal Maycomber and some of the early founders of the whole movement. And then at one point, I had been doing so many projects for J.E. Dunn Construction, they just hired me to be their internal national lean director. So I spent 9 years focused on evolving that organization in their lean thinking and execution, and developing a team of internal lean specialists. And now, since the beginning of 2022, I've been back off on my own consulting, really just working with organizations around the country, that helping them solve problems, develop capabilities, growing our thinking together, and just looking to help build leaders throughout the industry.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Yeah, that first thread that Rebecca's woven in so well is this learning thread. We're going to come back and tug on that thread in a second. But Dan, please tell the good people of the EBFC show a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a little older than Rebecca, although her lean journey, not well, no, a lot. Her lean journey is a little older than mine. I've been in design and construction for 46, 47 years, that I'll admit, which makes me over 40. I've had like 5 lifetimes over the years. I think we talked about this once upon a time. I was a minister. I had actually, all during my high school and college years and the first year of grad school, that was my aspiration, to be a minister. In fact, currently I'm living about 10 miles from the first church that I worked at, in the only church I worked at in college. I was student minister for a church near my undergraduate school. And then I went into prison, counseling and administration, youth prisons, a grim place. And it was the beginning of the gang world in California. So I was in California, and learned a lot for 7 years. Then I went into the restaurant business, and then I went into the computer back of office business. Taught a word processor how to do double entry bookkeeping back when there were dedicated word processors using, and anyway, and along the way, I discovered construction. I was doing, from a development point of view in my restaurant career, I was the developer of restaurants. Then I found myself on the other side as the general contractor. And so I was a project manager for general contractors, including having a general contractor's license in California. For 15, 20 years, went into consulting. I'm ashamed to admit it, although it is a good part of my background. I did claims consulting for a while and learned a lot about what goes wrong on projects and how early you could figure out something was headed south. And if you nip it in the bud, then you would not have problems later. I could prove it on project after project. Finally stumbled into Lean found me. In the form of the $7 billion project that Rebecca described. And it was the best time of my life in terms of really reorienting, straightening the career and heading in the right direction, the most positive direction possible. And I had the privilege of working with Rebecca as one of my teachers, and with Greg Howell. Greg and I were on that project, and Dick Beyer was my partner at the time. We were on that project for 19 months together. So I literally learned at the feet of the master. And sometimes the feet of the master were in my house, pulling his wet boots off and plopping down in the foyer and just sitting there for an hour and talking. That was Greg Howe. And in that period of time, by the way, he came into Dick's in my office one time, plopped down in the chair. It was his thing. And he ran his fingers. He had hair, I don't. He ran his fingers through his hair and went, oh, I've got this little nonprofit and I'm not paying attention to it and I've got to do something with it. And I said, really, what's that called? He said, Lean Construction Institute. And I went, wow, sounds really good. And it has, he kind of restarted, he and Will Lichtig and others kind of restarted it, brought me onto the board because at that time they were choosing board members based on who they wanted to have dinner with. It's a little more formalized process now. But I've been in probably several hundred sessions with at least 100 clients over the last 12 years, 11 years, 12 years. And it's been great. Awesome, absolutely awesome. I have many friends now that I never had and wouldn't have were it not for this, were not for Lean. So I'm here.
Yeah, you are absolutely here. And Dan, this is your second time on the EBFC show. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll put a link down to his first interview where you can hear much more about where he and I go deep into claim construction and all the glory that you can learn. And we might have said on that show, but it's worth getting or being involved in at least one construction lawsuit in your career, hopefully when you're younger, so that you have time to take advantage of all those learnings in your later years. But thank you so much. And Dan, you have had like 5 different careers for sure, at least. And this, I'm sure there's even more that you have been on, but
we don't talk about those.
You definitely share in common with Rebecca a willingness to learn and apply what you learn. So there's that thread tugged on just a little bit harder. The 3 of us have had lots of experiences in large and small companies, and we've all of us have had experiences in internal and external consulting capacities.
Yep.
I think it's worth like pulling on this learning string really hard and trying to understand what's the philosophy of the people leading these organizations, like at the executive level or project management level, that has some ability to create training opportunities for their staff. Like these learning paths, like some things are accidental, some things are intentional.
Yeah.
I'm going to wonder, I think the 2 of you have got a lot of experience to answer the question, does training lead to learning? And so I want to just open that up as the theme for this show. Does training lead to learning? Because, I mean, I think we're biased. We might be biased and think that it does, but I'd like to get your initial thoughts on that, especially as a title of the show.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take the jump on this one, Felipe. I think in our industry, there's a tendency to believe that any organization that offers training is a learning organization, right? And I don't think that those 2 things are necessarily equal to each other, or they are absolutely can be connected. You know, putting people in a classroom or going through an exercise or whatnot can really help build awareness. But until they put what they've learned or what they've experienced into action, they're not cementing the learning, right? And it's not just enough to have training across the board for companies. And learning can look like a number of other things as well. And where I have seen high performers really grow is when they take ownership of their own learning, right? And so they'll be intentional about training classes they take and then putting things into practice. They'll be intentional about setting goals of something else they want to learn outside of that and finding a way to grow themselves, whether it's book study or taking classes outside of their company, or reaching out and saying, hey, Felipe, you're really good at this. Would you consider being my mentor or my coach? Yeah. You know, taking initiative to continue learning themselves, I think has been that's what separates some of the really rock star learners from others. And then on the flip side, I've also seen some people who have high consumption rates of podcasts and books and articles and things like that, but they don't necessarily put it into practice.
Yeah.
And so that's not necessarily helpful either, right? You can have all the head knowledge in the world,
Yeah.
but if you don't have the experiential knowledge to go with it, it's not nearly as meaningful.
That's well said. Does training equal learning? Maybe. One of the interesting things is to look at the different forms of consumption of training and see what the retention rate is. The lowest retention rate tends to be with lecture, right?
Right.
And in fact, I was remembering this morning of a class, my Psych 101 class as a freshman in college. The college professor, this is a long time ago, before we had whiteboards, they had blackboards with chalk, white chalk.
I remember, Dan.
Remember those days? I lived in those days.
Some of our listeners might not.
Well, the professor, the students, there were 25 Psych 101 students. Some of them would become psychologists. So they were serious. And the students observed that when he would write on the board and turn around and talk to the students, that sometimes it was really engaging and they would lean forward. And when they did that, he would do this. He would wipe his hands on his lapels and there would be chalk dust left on his lapels. So they conspired between classes. Let's see if we were learning Pavlov. Let's see if we can shape his behavior. So they decided that every time he wrote on the board and turned around, together we would all do this. And he would do this. And at the end of that class, he was covered in white chalk dust. And one of the students busted us, went up and told him what we had done. And he thought it was great. We had internalized Pavlovian responses. But anyway, but that's about the only thing I took out of that class. That's the problem with lecture, is that the retention rate is stuff like that. So Rebecca nailed it. She said, it matters that you learn and then do, that put it into action. And in Lean, we have a phrase, tightly couple learning with action. So that rather than learn a whole bunch of stuff and then go out and do one thing, let's learn and do and learn and do in little increments, small steps, and work our way up from awareness to competence and ultimately to mastery. But let's do it in small batches, in little bites, and training at just the moment that you need to apply it, literally coupled with action. And the interesting thing to me is that when one of the military, U.S. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, when they train, they don't sit in a classroom and learn a whole bunch of stuff and then wait for a war. No, they train and then they train in the field, go to the Gemba, right? They reproduce this. And so that it becomes automatic, almost autonomic in the way that they engage their training. So we can learn a lot from some of those kind of things. And definitely small batches, video is great. I love podcasts, and hour-long podcasts are about what you got to do these days. But training in a video should be like 3 to 9 minutes. It should be just enough to give you that thing you need, and then you go do it. So you don't have to go searching for it. But yeah, that's Rebecca. I should have just said I agree with Rebecca and stopped.
No, I love what you said there, because now I'm going to carry on to that too.
Good.
Pile on, if you will.
Yeah.
I think part of it too, Felipe, comes back to what outcome are you looking to achieve, right? And specifically what Dan's talking about, if you're looking to build a competency in something, you have got to couple that learning with action, or else you won't build that competency. Now, I do think there is a place and a space for high-level awareness training for new ideas and new, this roadshow that I just mentioned earlier that we're doing, when people don't have exposure to something, it helps them understand why they need to maybe learn more. But if you're trying to if you're looking for an outcome of competency in a skill, there has to be action embedded in the training, or has to take place right afterwards, needs to, right, for optimum results.
And I've had people message me on some of the things that both of you said, to unpack just a little bit. Like someone has said, what's a good book I should read? And then I said, I don't know. Let's talk first. And we start talking, and I come to realize that Rebecca exactly described the person that's read every book, consumed every podcast on the topic, like ad nauseum, but has done zero to apply it. And I said to them, I was like, well, I would turn it back and say, what was your favorite thing that stuck with you? Like in Dan's example, he remembered that teacher getting made to get his coat dirty like a dog hearing, the bell to drool, like in the classic Pavlovian experiment. Okay, that thing that you really liked, that stood out to you. What can you experiment with on that tomorrow to get them to take some action? I said, now based on that change, then come back to me and let's see what we can recommend. And 10 out of 10 times, Rebecca, they don't come back because they're in a habit of just consuming and piling in and stuffing everything they can in, and nothing ever gets out this way. Unfortunate. So I think for leadership listening to this, if you've got a reason to put people into a training, like Rebecca and Dan said, what outcome are you looking for? Do you just take people out of work for 2 days and, buy them some cheap continental breakfast or a decent lunch and say, thank you for being here? Or are you trying to change something about your business? And I think that's something that we sometimes miss. Pulling that thread just a little bit tighter. I mean, the two of you have amazing experiences. Like I said, large companies, small companies, multi-billion-dollar projects, $1,000 quick hitting projects. In your experiences, what type of training do you think results in the best staff retention, where we can go see after that they are different because of what they've experienced?
There are two forms of training that I think are most valuable. One is training coupled with a coach. There are some really great stats about how much gain there is, comparative gain there is in coaching as an addition to training. In training, you get like I think it's a Harvard Business Study, 28% increase or 24% increase in productivity if you do good training. If you couple that with coaching, it jumps to 88%. So there is a human element to this. Part of it is the relatedness that we were discussing earlier. One of the three internal motivators, and you're building competency, but you're building it with relatedness. And then the other aspect of this is this DC and Ryan understanding that the third thing that motivates people, the third internal need that motivates people, is autonomy. So letting people choose the thing that they're interested in and train in that. The problem is that people don't like to admit when they're not good at something, particularly people in positions of responsibility. So one of the ways you can do that is make a banquet of training available to them and let them choose the dishes that they're going to train in right now autonomously. It's more motivating to them. It addresses that immediate need, and they don't have to fess up that I'm a superintendent and I don't know any way to do last planner. It's much better if they can learn it, either in a group or individually to do that, and then it sticks.
No, well done. Yeah. How about you, Rebecca? Anything you want to add to that about what type of training do you see gets the best staff retention? Like Dan said, seeing that 20% adoption of what they learned, those concepts.
I think that there's a lot of mediums out there that you can use for training, right? You can do in-person stuff, you can do virtual things, you can do videos, and I think Dan's point about coupling it with a coach, I would say someone who can at least help understand the outcome you're trying to achieve with that person or group and make sure that it's directed and geared towards that outcome, right? And, some virtual training sessions have actually been really, really effective. I've seen that. Some of them are terrible. Some in-person training sessions can be terrible, even if there are exercises involved and, some of those sticky kind of things. If they're led by someone who maybe would be better skilled doing something different, right?
That's so polite.
They see themselves as a sage on a stage.
They're trying, right? I mean, people always do these things with good intentions, and God knows I have learned a lot about some of those kinds of things. The organization I was with for 9 years, one of the first things we did was brought all these people into this great 2-day training class. They all learned a lot, but then when they all went back to their projects, they stumbled and fell because they had no one there to help them day in, day out. And they were too far removed from the time of learning to action. So learned really quickly that it doesn't do any good to arm people with pitchforks and torches and let them go carry, right? If you're not going to help them implement what they're doing. So I don't think there's an easy answer to the question. I think it ties right back to what are you looking to achieve? And Dan said this earlier, and I'll use a slightly different language, just in time training. I think that is really right. When I'm going to need that skill, that's when you need to teach it to me. That will be or I need to learn it. That will be your best retention, right? If I can go ahead and put that right into practice.
No, that's smart. And let me add to that. You said earlier, Rebecca, you mentioned video training, and I happen to have a soft spot for video training because we do that. But one of the things that the just-in-time aspect is that you can learn something, but you need a refresher. And as much as I advocate coaching, coach isn't going to be around 24/7. So that video clip, that 3 to 9 minute video clip on that specific thing on a just-in-time basis is a perfect refresher to get right back into it. So this is we should be talking about learning rather than training, I think, because learning is pull and training has the implication of push. And we know in the lean community, pull trumps push every time. Pull beats push every time, almost every time. Push when you must, Greg Howell said. So the ability to match the type of training that's available and the moment that it's needed is really key.
Yeah, I had the honor of working with an organization recently that had a business problem. The market had shifted, and they had this entire group of people. I'm going to leave it anonymous to protect the guilty and the innocent alike. And so the market shifted where they were working, and they were working across a significant geography in the United States. And they didn't have a way, they didn't have a process to even communicate with the different people in this group to tell them that the market had shifted. Like, leadership had understood it. They were seeing the metrics with it, and they were not delivering. And so they engaged me, and I said, well, I think we should start with telling people like why you want to make this training mandatory. Yeah. Like, what's the reason? And they're thinking like, do we really need to tell people that? If we just invite them, won't they just come? I was like, not maybe 10 years ago, but not in today's environment. And so just like the market shifted for you, and did anyone predict that this change was going to happen? They're in an environment now where they're going to more collaborative type of contracting. It's things like design, build, and integrated project delivery. That's the new thing to them. They've been more used to a hard bid for forever. Their entire company history is they've thrived in that environment. Now it's not there anymore to the numbers that it used to be. And so we had to open up each session with why are you here? And just be completely honest about the things that they were missing. And right away, the feedback at the first break from the employees was that I had no idea. I thought everything was just going great. Like, we didn't know. And it definitely changed the level of engagement. The executives and the leaders realized that this is not going to be one and done. This is a ton of information that they wanted. Not even, like, to you guys, to your point, sometimes there's such a thing as too much. And there's only so much that people can take in. They got to weave it in, like you said, Dan. I think this was a great showing here visually. And with my hands, I've got my fingers intercrossed. And you got to bring in the stuff that people need, couple that with the needs of the organization, but don't forget the needs of the individuals. Like, are we setting our people up to thrive? Or are we just checking a box to say that we've done something and that they've been exposed?
You're describing autonomy. When you say people need to know the why, DC and Ryan say, as a part of learning, as a part of just working, in order to be motivated, employees need autonomy. They need to know first, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this work? Why are you assigning me this project? Why are we doing this? If we don't understand the why, we're being told to do something, and the motivation fizzles. Being able to know why and then choose to do that is key. And that's true with whether it's a learning experience or work itself. The why is really important. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I like that.
Well, just 40 years of research.
And that's a small thread that's worth pulling on too. Like the philosophy of the executives running an organization or the project leaders that again have the ability to designate time for training on the job, or as a company wide, what type of training do we have in construction? Both of you know, most medium-sized companies and larger only bring people in for training 2 times a year on average.
Yeah.
Just a teeny tiny number. It's like you work 52 weeks a year, and out of 52 weeks, you've got some vacation. And then 2 days out of 365, people come in on average to train. And that is such a consistent number. I've seen that with trade contractors, general contractors, specialty contractors, and the number gets worse with consultants. I think there's even less consulting organizations because they're all expected to always ground running.
They know everything.
Yeah, they're supposed to know everything. But I think philosophically, is there a connection between training and company culture from your guys' perspectives? I think let's go to Rebecca first.
I think Felipe, there absolutely is, and I'd like to, and I'll touch on some of the things that you also mentioned a few minutes ago about that other client and that other training. So, 2 of the organizations that I'm currently working with, 2 very different stories, but both of them we are looking to try to inject small, ongoing, regular trainings that everybody can attend on a regular basis, and we're doing them remote because the companies, both of them, have sizable geographic footprints. One is more across the country, one is more regional. And we're starting all of those, either starting or ending. First of all, why? What is the problem we're trying to solve with this little snippet of something we're training you on? And then when applicable, not only why, but what's in it for you, right? How is this going to make Dan's day better when he learns this, right? Why? Not only why is it a good thing to learn organizationally, but now let's help you be selfish about it, right? And then trying to end a lot of them very intentionally with, okay, so we just talked through a whole bunch of things. Here is one action you can go try and implement and go do, and then reach out for help or talk to a friend or whatever. And I think as you get more people engaged in learning together, it absolutely impacts your company culture in a positive way because you've got more engagement, right? So, and training is one of those ways that you can do it if you bring in good threads of training. If it's like that example you mentioned, and yes, I've seen plenty of that, where it's just 2 days a year, right? It doesn't foster the mindset that we want people continuously learning, right? If I only get to go learn something 2 days a year and it's not part of my daily or weekly work, right? If we're not teaching people to reflect and learn based on their own work every single day, you're not becoming a learning organization. And that's not what sets people apart, right? When people get engaged and they're taking ownership of their learning, their managers and their peers are helping them learn. One of the big shifts I've seen lately is a lot of organizations focusing more on setting development goals for their people and then teaching their managers how to coach their employees to grow in those development areas. And many times we're seeing very well-intended people who have been very successful in the construction industry for a long time treat those just like the regular old SMART goals of like, you have to accomplish X amount of sales by the end of the year, right? And so it'll take us time to get there, but those leaders who are taking the time to develop their people, you bet we're seeing a difference in the culture of the organizations and a positive momentum in a big way.
Rebecca's describing an intentional culture, building an intentional culture. Every company has a culture. And for a whole lot of them, it's either accidental or it has evolved over the years, and whoever was the CEO or the chief operations officer or the project manager on a project kind of led the culture in a certain way, or maybe it rebelled against that and it went a whole nother way. And one of the diciest things is for middle management to learn new skills or be expected to do things differently, because they've been mastering the company culture all these years to climb up that ladder. And if that ladder changes, they're a little resistant to it. So getting that group involved, enthusiastic, and you were describing some pushback from some people who didn't want to become coaches to the other, because this changes things. And now how do I climb this ladder? But the idea of setting an intentional culture on a project, equally importantly, maybe more importantly, in an organization. Rebecca is really good at this because she's been in the C-level offices professionally long enough to really have observed that. I've done some of that, but she's better at it than I am, I think. So listen to what Rebecca's saying, because she's very smart and her experience tells you a lot.
And I think, Dan, when you said a little resistant, I would say that actively working to stop you.
Yeah,
there will be people in middle management, and it's because that's the system that's in place. Like exactly like you said, if there's unspoken rules and the culture of how people elevate and move up, and suddenly the organization tries to inject a change, not realizing that it's a massive system-wide change, people will actively work against it.
And they don't realize they're cutting their own throats, because construction is going through a period of disruption. We have some massive problems and our productivity is awful. And everybody knows it, including the owners, and they're tired of it. And if we did things right, we could save $1.6 trillion a year and put it to good use, building more things. But we're not doing that. And training and building of intentional culture is a big part of the solution of doing that. There are others, but that's a big part.
I want to go back to one more thing, Rebecca, you touched on, and Dan, you touched on this also, but this idea of employee engagement. And Rebecca, when I shifted that question for you about retention, I think it's worth stating that Gallup Research, who's also owns the Clifton Strengths Finder. Again, we'll put a link in the description for people that want to get their top 5 strengths. But Gallup has done research on this time and time again. And in the United States, I don't know about internationally, but here in the US, employee engagement across industries is less than 70%. So it means like only a third of your employees or less are actively engaged in the business of what your company does. And the other 3/4 don't care. They're apathetic. I mean, this is right from the research. Like, apathetic means they are not connected to the success or failure of what the operation is doing.
Yeah.
So if you think about, if I have a team of 10 people, that means I've got 3 people engaged and driving to successful project delivery. And I have 7 people that just show up and get a paycheck, do the minimum to not get yelled at or be noticed or whatever else, and just don't actively care. That is what the research says. And unfortunately, I think all of us have had experience with project teams or organizations where we see those numbers reflected in reality.
Yeah, they're along for the ride and the paycheck, and because they don't want to do nothing, they can live a little better if they get a paycheck. And I don't understand that. I've never understood that because I'm one of those guys that says, "Why am I alive?" And in my lowest moments, why are any of us alive? And by the way, in those lowest moments, and we've all been there, the answer that has kept me going sometimes is to help alleviate the suffering of children. I mean, if there's no other reason to be alive, that's a pretty good reason right there. And then you can work your way up to helping the company make more profit at some point. But it starts with a base of humanity and then working your way up. If you're not engaged in work, why are you there?
And I think, Dan, to throw a little bit of empathy out there for folks, I think it's a very wicked problem, right? There are a lot of facets to it. But the culture that we were just talking about, I mean, the culture is that's okay, right? That is status quo. That's fine. That's how people get promoted. And I would say those people, while they might not be heavily engaged in their work, they generally care about their paycheck. They generally care about promoting up the ladder so that they can make more money, right? So, and they look at their job as something that is there to serve them So
Yeah.
it's not that they just don't, right? They just don't care. I think, and it's a shame because there is so much more life has to offer by being engaged in what you do.
Yeah.
Life can get so much better, but I think people don't recognize that, right? And that's really a shame. And I think once you wind up in a role where you are engaged in what you're doing and engaged and invested in the success of your organization, it's hard to settle to not have that again, right?
Yeah.
Really, really hard to settle.
Yeah. One of the ways I think bosses, people come to a company because the work is interesting, sounds interesting, or they, for whatever reason, but they leave by and large because of their boss. I mean, that's like 60, 70% of all outgoes are that. One of the things bosses can do is start paying attention to the people, is actually engage one-on-one with the individuals, get to know them, get over yourself, boss, and get to know people and find out what's really bugging them. Through the 2 years that we've been dealing with the COVID stuff, and some of it in lockdown and some of it masked, and all the impact psychologically to all of us has been significant. And if we don't recognize that, you have to recognize it. If you don't see it in yourself, you probably should look a little harder. And if you don't see it in others, you're really blind. And people are suffering in ways that they can't talk about. And in construction, you really can't talk about it. And there are companies now, both one of them, Turner, another, that have programs to help to actually actively be there for people. But if you're a supervisor, you're already there.
Right.
And you have an opportunity to affect 5, 8, 10, 30 people in a profound way that may save their life, or at least help them unlock the pain they're in and get it out, and let's go forward. I mean, there are lots, and that's the relatedness that leads to the openness and the autonomy that will develop the competence that we all want in life, which is what training and learning is all about.
I do. And I've seen that.
Rebecca opened my head, by the way, when she said, well, some of our listeners are those people, Dan. And here I am capping on people who are not engaged, and I'm talking to people who are not engaged. Let's understand that too. So thank you.
It's a systemic thing. Like we're not blaming the individuals that are in that 3/4, 70%. It's the environment that they come to work in. And it's one of the great things about where I'm working now at Bolt. Like they literally have people that have even special sticker designations and have pulled for training and volunteered to be someone that you can go and talk to. And they're at all different levels of the organization. I met one that's in like supply chain logistics, and I've met a few that are actual executives, and some even running entire offices and regions. And you could literally just walk in and just say, I need to talk about this, and I don't need you to do anything other than just listen. They know exactly how to receive you, to engage with you, to follow up, keep you connected. It's incredible. And it's something so radically different. This didn't exist 5 years ago.
Well, in Bolt, it didn't exist a year ago.
Right.
Right. I mean, I had the privilege of having a conversation with Renee, and I forget her last name. I'm sorry, Renee, who is coordinating that program, and saw the little 3-minute video that they put. It's brilliant. That's one of the ways you break through in things like that.
Yeah, I think it's actually Renee Wolf. Thank you, Renee. Yeah.
Thank you, Renee. And I apologize, Renee. It took a Felipe to help me remember.
I'll tell her no that you shouted out to her in this episode, Dan. She'll love that. I just met her in Wisconsin like 2 weeks ago for the first time.
She is so warm. I felt like confessing to her. I'm telling her my problems, and she calls herself a health coach. God, don't we all need a health coach? I mean, come on.
We do. I like those. Let's go into a positive spin on that, where there are things that we can do.
Yes.
And so one of the things that we in the Lean community understand is this concept of small batching. And small batching, small bite-sized chunks, little increments. You guys have both hit on that. And I've taken Dan's courses on his website. I highly recommend you do the same in any myriad of topics. It's like a all-you-can-eat smorgasbord buffet of things that you can take and bite-sized chunks and get to start practicing and implementing. But
Thanks.
why the small batches? Like intuitively we know, but other people know big batch. Big batch is predominant across the industry. Why small batches?
Let me say a couple of quick things, and then I'll let Rebecca give the real answer. But small proof, it's easy to prove that small batching in dealing with atoms, materials, or even in dealing with electrons in design, but small batching gets you to the end faster. There's a little video on Construction Accelerator you was talking about that shows that. It literally demonstrates with a timer if you do batches of 5 or 10 or 1, and everybody in manufacturing knows single batching, single piece flow is the way. But in terms of learning, it goes back to the things Rebecca was saying about just in time and doing it in small increments. We are in the short attention span generation. We are the short attention span generation. It amazes me that people listen to a 1-hour podcast. It's got to be really compelling, because that's a whole hour. They do it, I think, while they're driving, because they probably would be watching TV otherwise. But and people don't read books as much anymore either. A lot of people do, and they brag about it. But it's harder to read a book than it is to watch a quick video. And YouTube, full of quick videos. They've demonstrated that. So the small batch learning is just what fits our lifestyle. It's what we have time for. It fits our short attention span interest, and it allows you to target right to what you want to know right now. Now, Rebecca, give me the real answer.
No, Dan, I love everything you said. I will add on to that, but it's no more real than what you just said. Is it gives you time to, again, going back to putting what you're learning into practice. It gives you time to cement that learning. And, if you, and Felipe, you mentioned this in your story you told just a few minutes ago, if you're trying to share 100 pieces of information with people, and you fill a whole day teaching them these 100 pieces of information, they will not be able to be competent in any of them. Teach them 1, get them competent, then teach them 2, then teach them the 3rd, then the 4th, right? And go through helping them learn and get a handle on 1 before moving on to the second concept, right? It's now sometimes you're dealing with a concept that might be a little bit of a sticky wicket and might have multiple concepts embedded within it. Last planner system's a great example, right? It in and of itself is actually a pretty big, complex system.
Yeah.
Not complex, like difficult, but just there's a lot of parts and pieces to it. So it's helpful for people to understand, have awareness of the overall whole, and then start mastering those pieces one at a time, or at least learning them one at a time and putting them into practice one time. So I think when you put too many things in front of somebody at a time, even if they have the attention span to pay attention to all of it, once you're done, they're going to forget half of what they learned because there are just too many things that you've tried to cram into that brain.
There's a teacher at Wichita State that uses an example, Rebecca, that I think fits here. He says there are 2 people, a man and a woman, who are standing on the ground looking at a building, and there's a 2nd floor balcony on the building, and they both want to go there. There's a party, I don't know. So the man says, well, I'm really good in basketball. I'm a good jumper. I'm going to jump up there. But it's a 12, 15-foot balcony, so good luck with that. So he starts trying to really get jumping up there, right? The woman sees a set of stairs around the corner, and she just walks over and walks up all the little stairs, step by step by step by step, and she gets there, and the guy's still down there trying to jump up. That's the difference between small batch learning and gulp batch learning. That's the difference.
Oh my God, Dan, that analogy is so beautiful. Just last week, I was talking to Nick Lofgren. This is the shout out for you, Nick. And we were describing this concept of how people learn, just in general, just having a general concept about learning. And I said, sometimes people have this like mountain of stuff, like you said, like up on the balcony. and we're asking people to jump over the Grand Canyon to get to the other side to where all that stuff is. And I said, you can't get there. You got to go step by step down, cross the river. Luckily, it's because of drought, you can just walk across it and then go back up the other side and to get there. But the journey down, across, and up is even more valuable than reaching the balcony.
Much.
To use your example, or jumping over the Grand Canyon. So that's beautiful. So I think that you guys hit on the benefits of like the small batch, but to piggyback on that, because we're talking about human beings here, are there benefits when people can work in small groups, or do you think there's even more benefit of people being self-guided all by themselves or with their team in little groups, individuals or teams? What do you think?
Whatever they want, whichever appeals to them more. Rebecca used to work for a company that invented something called study action groups, where they would read a book and they would meet once a week, right? Isn't that the way it worked? Read a chapter, meet once a week and talk about it. And then what action will you take based on that? So Felipe, you mentioned our videos. We've developed video action team guides for people to watch 15 minutes worth of video and then meet in the same small group of 6 to 8 people, 45 minutes a week. So now all these are all short times, and discuss. The guide kind of gives them some questions to talk about to help them. And then what is the action you're going to take this week to put that into practice? So I think, and I was just talking literally yesterday to a lady named Ritu in Canadian construction in Canada.
I know Ritu.
Do you know Ritu?
Yeah, shout out to Ritu.
Every time I talk to her, I end up so more energized that, you know, and I was in the car, so I couldn't do anything about it. But she's got video action teams going, particularly with superintendents, and to having great effect. There's another group called MCR Trust, based in Boston, but they build all over America. They're self-builders. And I'm part of a video action team that they're doing for 8 or 10 folks in New England. Well, one of them is in Denver with Rebecca, but and it is exciting to me because I facilitated the first one just to kick it off, and then they take turns facilitating. It's exciting to me the way these discussion groups unfold and the things they teach each other or pull from each other. And some are shared experiences and some are unique experiences. And this small batch learning together is really powerful. And I mean, I have so many energizing people and things in my life. These kinds of things really excite me.
Multiple perspectives, right? Building on each other. So yes, self-guided individual learning is fantastic, right? I will never knock that. I think that is always a good thing. But when you can pull different perspectives together to maybe this is something I took out of what we tried to do and Dan took something different, or he sees my blind spot to what I learned. And I say, oh, well, this is what I learned. And it says, whoa, wait, be cautious because blah, blah, blah. So I think when you can get a small group to learn together in any way, shape, or form, I think that's fantastic. As long as you've got that right level of, at risk of using an overused term nowadays, psychological safety amongst that group, right? Where people can push back. And we really are trying with that team to build healthy conflict because you get so much more out of it. So then where you might have learned 10%, now you might learn 50% more based on talking with other people about it. And that, Felipe, might be some of my individualization coming out.
No, it's like, sometimes when you talk, Rebecca, it's almost like you're taking it right from my mind. So thanks.
I will tell you about the secret chat thread we have going on.
Yeah, Rebecca and I are secretly chatting through this technology. No, we're just sharing like-mindedness. It's such a good, so positive. And I want to just flip it. Let's go to the dark side for a second, because we wouldn't be doing it justice if we didn't come back to the other side, the resistors, like we said. So we've all heard excuses like, I'm too busy to train, or we've seen that cartoon picture, and I'm going to put it on the screen here so people could see people pushing a wheelbarrow type of cart with square wheels and somebody offering them round wheels. and the people pushing saying we're too busy
Yeah.
because we're pushing this cart. So how do we help people overcome that excuse of I'm too busy to train, or we're in crunch time right now, we don't have time to stop and pause and change direction, even though all metrics point to a crash landing way beyond what they contractually owe? How do we help people find time to learn?
Stand back and watch them fail. They'll learn it good when they do that. I prefer not to. I'm not saying that's the best way. I'm saying that's one way, is that the universe will teach you very heavy lessons one way or the other. You're going to learn them. But Rebecca, there's got to be a better way.
Especially right now in our industry, everybody is working crazy effort, right? And so your question, Felipe, is that much more exasperated right now. And I think a couple of things that can be helpful. It's not hard to get anybody to admit that if I don't improve what I do at some point, other people will improve and be better than me, right? People can kind of fundamentally recognize that there is a need to grow. So now it's a matter of, after you get them to recognize that, helping them figure out how to take the time to learning. And some of that is, companies need to be more intentional with all the things that Dan and I have been talking about, right? About the just-in-time training, right? Don't bring people together for a week to train them on a bunch of stuff they're not going to use for a year, right? Don't bother doing that. Do just-in-time learning. The other piece that I would say, and the helping them recognize what's in it for them and all of those things. There's a great little story in Steven Spears' book, Chasing the Rabbit. I think now it's called High Velocity Edge, where a bunch of nurses were supposed to be making improvements to work and they were too busy. Yeah. And so what they did is they said, okay, we're busy, but we can figure out how to set aside 15 minutes a day. And as that 15 minutes, as they started making improvements, they got more time back. And so then they grew the amount of time they committed to it. But if you're intentional about your learning, maybe it doesn't need to be even 15 minutes a day, maybe 15 minutes a week. I'm going to learn 15 minutes a week, and whatever I learned, I'm going to put into practice. Yeah. And that should make my job a little bit better. And then we'll take that. And so find what is that smallest amount of time that you can possibly give up, and just start somewhere, because starting somewhere is better than not starting.
Rebecca said something magical. She said they started with 15 minutes a day addressing problems that they were having. And as they solved the problems, they had more time. Felipe, you said people are working far too many hours right now, and they're exasperated. Part of the problem is we're wasting. All of this extra time we're spending is waste. We're not going home seeing our family and our kids and spouse because we're wasting time with waste. and so for the person that doesn't think they have time to train, I would suggest they train on 5 why and root cause analysis and apply it to one problem that they're having. Find out the real root cause, because all of your imagining and is all BS. It isn't like what you had before. This is a new problem. This is a different solution. We don't even know what the solution is. We can try mitigation measures. We can try. Just start with that. I mean, watch a 15-minute video on root cause analysis and then do it. And on one problem you're having. That's the Paul Akers formula, right? Fix what bugs you. Whatever's driving you crazy, fix that. And you'll probably get a little more time, like Rebecca says, and you kind of grow it from it. And then you can start applying it to other kinds of things. But start with something. My goodness.
My goodness. I love that, Dan. And then you guys, you're talking about like the story with the nurses. Rebecca was awesome. Dan, reminding us, how simple Paul Akers makes it for fixing what bugs you. How do we cultivate that type of leadership or that shift inside of our project teams or across organizations? What would you, for the people in the C-suites listening, or the project executives, or just the leads on jobs, what can they do to cultivate leadership today?
They got to be part of the solution, right, Rebecca?
The thing that comes to my mind, the first thing is you have to lead by example. Yeah. And so often a project leader or a company leader, they say, this is great, we need all of you to go do this. No, take time to do it yourself. You have room to learn too, and show people that you're learning, right? That is you can tell your direct reports or your people or your kids to do whatever you want to tell them to do, but they're going to watch how you behave, and they're going to make an assessment. Is it more important to do what they're doing or to do what they're telling me to do? So that feels overly simplified, but for me, that's what it really boils down to.
I think you hit it. Felipe, you were part of what we called the Gang of 16 a year ago that I assembled, and then they took off and did great things. This was a group of 16 lean leaders in the broader community. It included owners like Merck and University of California, San Francisco, and Sutter Health. It included designers like Bueller Engineering and WSP and others, and BSA Life Structures was on it. It included some of the trades like Atlantic Constructors and Lighthouse Electric, my buddy Bob Salage, Neville Group, Rosenden, Stephanie Roldan, awesome. And it included a whole bunch of general contractors: Brassfield and Gorey, Landis, McCarthy, Robinson, Morton, Sunt, Turner, and WGH. I used a list because I didn't want to leave anybody out. That group of people came up with 5 ways for us to recover from the pandemic and pull lean more deeply into our organizations. And of the 5 ways, one of them was leadership from the top, understanding the business case for lean, executive engagement, executive strategy, and actually embedding goal setting and tactical, lean tactical information. But it's got to start with I can't tell you, of all of the companies that I've worked with, well over 100, I quit counting at 100. Most did not include working with the C-suite. I'm sorry, but it came. I mean, a few did, and hooray for them. And I genuinely appreciated it, and it made a difference. But mostly it came from the field folks who had a problem and needed to learn something, or from a lean champion who wanted to kind of help grow the movement. But the C-suite has kind of been MIA in a lot of this, and that's not good. That's sad. There are notable exceptions. Victor Sanvito, there are notable exceptions, but that's if we don't have leadership leading in reducing waste that's hitting their bottom line and in building greater value for their customers that's hitting their bottom line and their top line, then we're not doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
I just want to add on to that, right? All the work Dan has done without involving C-suite has been phenomenal work and seeing great results at the same time, right? It just, your question, Felipe, was very specifically about an organizational climate, right? And that's where you cannot shift an organizational culture or climate or expectations without the C-suite being part of that.
That is the great thing about lean and tools like Last Planner and root cause analysis and 5Y, is that you can do them at any level. You can do them anywhere and
get great results.
And get great results. I mean, seriously, I worked with a team on a $648 million project in Stockton, California. And we talked about this in the last podcast, Felipe. And they literally doubled production in 6 weeks using a Last Planner. That's like shocking. It blew my mind. They had to do it to make the schedule, but they did it. And this is with hundreds of people out there in the workforce. But just by removing stupid waste of handoffs and not planning for this and that, just by putting intention into it, they doubled productivity. And that's not, your mileage may vary, but it's not unusual to get 27% increase. I can document that. And so it's great. Start anywhere, but my goodness, leaders, we need you. We want you. And by the way, your your company needs you. This is a call to arms. Your company needs you. You will be greatly enhanced. You'll have more fun. You will be celebrated for your brilliance. And by the way, your bottom line will improve significantly.
True, true, and true. At the worst case, you're going to get 25% faster on your schedules, right? With this like ad hoc stuff. Now, if you go,
Come on,
bring the leaders in. But Dan is absolutely right. Like, how many leaders are out there that are not having fun every day? How many leaders are listening to the show now where you dread to hear your phone ring or to see an email come in because you know it's like some massive problem that's going to be an undertaking to resolve, or things that you're putting off because it's not fun. Now, if you engage like Rebecca and Dan are talking about, and you shift the system just right here, you just shift it right here like a game. It can absolutely be fun. It can be absolutely engaging. And I want to go back to Rebecca. Rebecca, final thread to pull on. How do you turn frontline supervisors into effective coaches? You've been Dan, you've been a coach for my lifetime, Rebecca's lifetime, in 5 different industries. So let me start with Rebecca first. How do you turn a frontline supervisor into an effective coach?
Yeah, so Felipe, that could be a whole separate podcast session. So just that my high level, right? But high level pieces. First of all, the understanding and expectation that is what we want them to do at an organizational level, and then teach them how to coach. So some of the best people that can be really natural at this are some of the old school superintendents, not the ones who are necessarily dictatorial, but the ones who, and one of my last jobs, we called it back counter training, right? But that take the younger generation under their arm and under their wing and help them grow and develop, right? But helping give our supervisors a process and an understanding of how they can be better coaches, and how that is now part of what we want you to do. And it ties back to what we were talking about developing people, and to just tell people what to do all the time is very opposite from coaching people, right? Coaching people, you want to show them, but then you want to help them learn to figure it out for themselves. And then you want to help them learn to figure out new ways to do things so that you can learn from them. But if you don't set that expectation and you don't help them learn how to be coaches, you can tell them, but that's not going to get them anywhere if they don't understand. They need help learning how to do it if they haven't done it before.
A couple of days ago, 3 other coaches and I did a webinar for LCI on coaching coaches. I can't even say it. It's such a good title. It's unpronounceable. What the steps that Rebecca's talking about are: first, develop an intention to coach. It is different than leading. And she hit the second one, and that is stop giving answers. The leader knows more than other people supposedly, or very often. And certainly in our mind, we know more. But stop. You don't need to be the one solving the problem if you're going to coach, because what the goal is for the other person to figure out how to solve the problem. So then number 3 is ask really good questions, non-judgmental, empathetic, and don't give away answers, open-ended questions. Just ask open questions. What do you think? What kind of information will you need to figure this out? Instead of, well, you're going to need this and this and this. No, what kind of information will you need to figure this out? Those kinds of things. There are steps to learn to being a coach. They're not complicated. They're 5. I've given you 3, and I'll stop. But the other part is, it's okay, I'll give you 4. The other part is you've got to become humble. You've got to go from the boss leadership role, which very often, leaders should be humble anyway. So servant leadership is the ideal, but be humble about it. You may or may not know all the answers. You don't need to as a coach. It's helpful to know the language and to know BS when you see it, but you're really pulling answers out of other people.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you so much, Rebecca. The 2 of you have really scratched the itch to go deep into learning and understand the differences between learning, training, intentional culture setting, I absolutely have enjoyed this time with both of you. Where can people find you all if they want to connect and go deeper?
The easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. I will one day have a website, but that'll be years from now. So LinkedIn, Rebecca Snelling, or RS Consulting.
And we'll put a link down there in the description so people can just click or tap your way
Awesome.
right to a direct message with Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. How about you, Dan?
And apparently Rebecca has the ability to mind engage, at least with you, Felipe. So maybe you can just contact Rebecca by sending her like a bat sign or something. So for me, I'm sorry, I took too long. For me, LinkedIn works great. If you can spell Fauchier, good luck with that. The website is tryca now, TRYCANOW now.com. And you can reach me through there. And I'm everywhere on the internet, I'm afraid. I've been around a long time. Many pages.
It's been my pleasure having you guys here on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, Felipe. This has been awesome.
It's been fun, always. Rebecca, you're a gem and a star.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer Manriquez. The EBFC show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.